Jen McCabe took the stand. The prosecution ran through the usual, who do you live with, etc. But he lingered on basketball, then asked her a question to elicit the fact she was previously a basketball coach. He's trying to paint a picture for the jury. Nice American family, nice mom, basketball coach, bake the jury an apple pie. Let me ask you something. Do you think a nice suburban mom is not capable of lying? Do you think a nice suburban mom would never ever cover for her family or herself? I haven't heard her testimony yet, so I'm not saying she's going to lie or tell the truth. I'm saying the prosecution is playing on a stereotype. He has done this before in this trial, so you know to watch out for that, especially if those stereotypes play to or elicit any kind of emotion in the listener. Ask anyone in marketing or politics. Ask any field agent in intelligence and those who train in influence. She was asked about whether she had Bluetooth in her SUV. Here's her answer.
You got a cell phone around that time, is that correct?
Yes.
Your cell phone, what if any connection did that have between cell phone and vehicle?
At that point, I don't think mine was connected. I'm not sure.
Because of previous questions in the trial, I suspect this will be important. She said she waited a few minutes before entering the waterfall because Matt was on a phone call. He couldn't walk and talk. He testified when he was on his call that he didn't think it was connected to the Bluetooth because Jen's phone would be the default connection as it was her vehicle. When he said that, he was surmising, and we've just heard Jen's phone wasn't connected to Bluetooth. My question is, why is the prosecution bringing out that Matt was on a call before going into the waterfall? Why is it important that Jen and Matt waited a few minutes before going in? Also, this is a very specific detail to have a memory of. Let's see how her memory is on other things. She testified she'd known John for a long time. I'm going to play a clip of a question and answer so you see demeanor and body language.
And how would you describe your relationship with John O'Keefe?
He was my friend. I love John. He was an amazing guy.
Now, with reference
She described meeting Karen in July 2020. Again, specific. She was asked how often she saw Karen after that, and she described something I thought sounded casual, like bumping into them at events and seeing them around and such. She was asked about her relationship with Reed, and her answer was, I enjoyed Ms. Reed, not Karen and not friends. She was asked if Karen and or John shared with her things about their relationship. She said sometimes. When asked what kind of things, she said, just how are you doing? How's she doing? Which indicates it's Jen doing the asking, as John doesn't need to ask, how's she doing? Jen doesn't describe either John or Karen actually confiding anything or anything substantive. It's pretty general. I've had more substantive conversations with the cashier at the corner store. The prosecutor elicits that Karen had brought a glass with her into the waterfall that she'd hid under her coat, and they chuckled about it. Lally asked, what, if anything, did you observe about the glass?
I believe it had ridges on it.
What, if anything, did you observe as far as what was in the glass?
It was clear.
Was there any other kind of like a straw or a lime or anything like that?
I don't remember.
Ridges. She remembers a detail like that, but not whether it had a lime or anything in it. Okay. The witness is suddenly licking her lips a lot off her baseline. They go through what everybody was drinking, and it's tempting to zone out here, but the witness slips up. Listen.
And with respect to Ms. Reed, same question as far as you recall her drinking, and if so, what, if anything, do you recall her?
Again, I remember just a clear glass with clear liquid in it.
This might not sound like much, but it is. It tells you where the witness's brain is. Her mind is not on what's in the glass, which was the question, but that it was a clear glass. She knows a clear glass was found at the scene. It's important that her brain here is on a clear glass rather than any number of things she could have thought about in respect to this area of questioning, including the question itself.
Any different glass beyond the one that you've already testified about, or no?
I don't remember, sorry.
She doesn't remember whether it was a different glass. Interesting. The glass was so extraordinary that she was focused on the ridges so much that she didn't know if there was a big bright old lime in it, but now she doesn't remember if Reed got a different glass or not. Is the witness suddenly unsure whether her previous answer about the ridges was correct? I don't know. I can't read minds, but this is interesting. McCabe testified that she spoke with John and he was excited about his niece getting accepted into the school. She said she spoke with Reed, and Reed shared information about a frustration she had. Wait, these two women who aren't really friends, who have never shared anything personal about relationship, are suddenly sharing a conversation in a loud bar during a festive evening with a band playing only a few feet away and all kinds of people around? Really?
Yes.
And what was it?
Karen had shared a little bit of frustration that morning, or one morning she had taken Kaylee to Dunkin' Donuts, and John, was frustrated, didn't, saying, don't take her, she's gonna, make a habit of it, meaning like she's gonna come to expect it every day. And then we just talked about how, challenging it is with kids. And, she mentioned that that's kind of all they have a fight about. And I said, yeah, well, welcome to parenthood, and, she just was a little bit frustrated, felt like the family needed to be doing more to help. And she just wished she had, more time, just her and John.
Wow. That's a heck of a conversation to have with someone who is not your friend in a loud, crowded bar during a celebratory evening. Let's look at this a little more closely.
Yes.
And what was it?
Karen had shared a little bit of frustration that morning, or one morning she...
Why the pauses? She knows this question is coming, yes? Note that morning, then the correction to one morning. She has to be careful about saying that morning because they might be able to prove otherwise. So it becomes one morning. So if it's one morning, then when? How recent? Nice and vague. If it's one morning, then why is Karen frustrated that night? By all accounts, Reed and O'Keefe were happy together that night and even lovey-dovey. If Reed was so frustrated with John that she's going to confide in someone who is not her friend in a loud and crowded setting, then why does everyone see her and John happy together? If it's so bad that it spills out here, would there be no hint of it at all at any other point? To anyone else?
He had taken Kaylee to Dunkin' Donuts, and John, was frustrated, didn't, saying, don't take her, she's gonna, make a habit of it, meaning like she's gonna come to expect it every day.
The lip licking, the dry mouth, the change in eye movement and eye contact.
And then we just talked about how, challenging it is with kids. And, she mentioned that that's kind of all they have a fight about.
Just so you know, in order to look at what she's claiming here, I'm having to suspend my belief, meaning I already believe this conversation didn't even occur. All we ever fight about. I suppose one could take that to mean the only time they fight is over the kids, or that they fight a lot and it's over the kids. Previous testimony from John's brother is that he did hear the two argue at times. But every couple argues. And whatever the arguments the two had in the past, they weren't bad enough for John's family to say, hey, listen, man, she's gotta go. Nor were they bad enough to cause John's brother and sister-in-law to distance themselves from Karen. But none of this matters because somebody's trying to paint a picture here.
And I said, yeah, well, welcome to parenthood, and, she just was a little bit frustrated, felt like the family needed to be doing more.
Wow. Low blow here. Was this woman gossipy or mean in high school? I mean, throwing in the family. Just put in as many wedges in between Karen and the family as possible, eh? Karen was friends with Aaron. Did she ever complain to Aaron the family didn't do enough?
And I said, yeah, well, welcome to parenthood, and, she just was a little bit frustrated.
In the next clip, watch for the lip licking and watch her eyes.
Felt like the family needed to be doing more to help, and she just wished she had, more time, just her and John.
Look at that expression. The lip lock immediately after the lie and the lick, eyebrows up and the eyes looking to see. Do you believe me? Wow. And wishing she had more time with John? Confiding in a loud bar to a non-friend, wedge between Karen and these kids who she loved and cared for and even spoiled. Karen doesn't tell anyone this, but she tells McCabe. And on that night in that setting, this is not believable. Not even a little bit. Let me ask you, what trope do you think this plays to? What emotions in others do you think this hooks into?
But again, it was just, girlfriend to girlfriend kind of venting.
McCabe was clear that she and Karen were not girlfriends. That was minutes ago, but now they're girlfriends. Okay. When asked about making plans for after the waterfall, Jen says Karen had asked to go to D&E to cook food. This testimony was the immediate response. Not that people were discussing, but specifically that Karen asked. Lally has elicited this so many times that I think he's going to somehow use it in his picture painting project. And notice the witness zeroed in on this. Unlike the others who first testified that there was some discussion among people, this witness knows that this answer is what Lally wanted. In the next clip, listen for the order of statements and what and how it changes.
So I went to meet my sister, Nicole. She was heading there because she was going to go have a drink with her. Her son was going to have some friends and then meet out. So I was going to meet them for a drink for my nephew's birthday.
Went to meet Nicole. That was the purpose. Went to meet Nicole. But then there's a narrative that wasn't asked for about why Nicole was going to the waterfall. Red flag here. Nicole was going to have a drink with her, and the witness changes course here. Instead of completing her sentence, she says her son was going to have some friends and then meet out. Nicole's testimony was that they had planned to take Brian Jr. out and have a drink and some appetizers for his birthday. But they canceled that plan because there was a storm coming. At the time, I thought her testimony was weird because even though there was a storm coming that was bad enough to cancel her plans with her son for his birthday, she still goes ahead to go out for drinks and leave him behind. So Nicole was not going out to celebrate her son's birthday. And Jen was not going out to celebrate Brian Jr.'s birthday. So nobody has answered the question of why they really went to the waterfall. If they just wanted to go out for a few drinks, why don't they just say so? Why point to Brian Jr.'s birthday as the reason when that's clearly not the reason. I have some ideas, but not enough information yet to speak anything out loud. What is it they're trying to hide? They are adults wanting to get together at a bar for a few drinks, like so many others. This is not a crazy or abnormal thing to do, so why lie about it? Why? McCabe testified that Brian Jr. suffers from anxiety and was really struggling at that time. I am inclined to believe that he did struggle with anxiety, and I base that on Brian Jr.'s testimony. I have a question though. It's the boy's birthday. There's a storm coming. The boy is having a hard time with his anxiety. So why does everybody abandon him in favor of going out to the bar? McCabe testified that Brian Albert extended the invitation generally for people to go back to Fairview. She said to John and Karen specifically, "You guys should come." She testified they both wanted to come. She testified she said to Karen, "Why don't you just come with me?" This is similar to what another witness said, but different in an important respect. Previous testimony from Mrs. Kolakitas was that Jen was saying to Karen, "You're coming with me," much less casual than what McCabe is presenting on the stand. McCabe suggested that Karen take a ride from her because John and Matt were still inside the waterfall. Why would Karen leave her vehicle and her boyfriend behind? Lally then moves forward in the timeline, but never addresses the issue of why or how it was that Karen did not end up driving with McCabe. Did Karen say no? What was the conversation there? What's the point of bringing up that Jen suggested Karen go with her? Jen testifies she had a brief conversation with Karen and John in the parking lot, but she hesitates just slightly, and it sounds almost like an admission. It was weird. This is innocuous, or it's not. When asked, she answers the conversation was about John and Karen coming back to Fairview. She said John and Karen left, but Jen was still there. She waited for Matt in her car. As for the amount of time she waited, she says it wasn't long. She also said she pulled up. I thought Matt's testimony was that he went to the vehicle, but I could be wrong. And there was a song and dance in his testimony about being on the phone to somebody else. Lally asks what communication Jen received while you were waiting for your husband or shortly after he got in the car. Stick a pin in this question. She says she got a text from John saying where to. What? They just had a conversation in the parking lot about going to Fairview. She didn't give an address or directions then? What? Lally asks how she responded to John's where to text. Her answer, I was driving, so I called. She was waiting for Matt, or he'd just got into her vehicle. Was she driving already and looked at the text while she was driving? Or did she get the text, look at it, and then instead of shooting a quick text back with the address that she failed to provide a few minutes before during the conversation that was specifically about going to Fairview? And she testified on this very day that her phone was not yet connected to her vehicle. Matt testified he could hear both sides of this conversation with John. Are they really telling us that an invitation had been extended and accepted inside of the bar and no one gave the address or location at that point? That Matt and John were together at the end of the night and Karen and Jen were together and nobody gave an address? That they had a conversation in the parking lot specifically about where they were going and no one gave an address or explained where it was? And now there's a phone conversation over a Bluetooth that wasn't yet connected. What is going on? As she's answering the question of whether or not her phone was connected to the Bluetooth, she says yes, but She's speaking in generalities. She says because it's her car, then her phone would have connected to Bluetooth. Then she adds, I would have plugged my phone into the car because I always plug my phone when I get in the car. Well, that's a different thing. Why is she adding that? It brings to mind the testimony of another witness who said she saw Jen's phone plugged into a charger in the kitchen at Fairview. And for those who don't already know it, the information I have about this case is limited to what has come out already at trial. So sometimes I might ask a question that some of you think, oh gosh, we all know the answer to that. It's okay to laugh at me a little bit. I get it. Hopefully you'll bear with me. You all have had a huge head start when it comes to piecing this together. Jen said she gave him the address and directions. She also said it's right at the bottom of Fairview. Then she said he called back a second time. Well, this is weird to me. First, John and Karen had a head start on Matt and Jen. It's a 4-minute drive, according to Matt's testimony. There's a text and 2 conversations in this short time span. And John O'Keefe has lived in Canton a long time. He may not know every single little street, but he is familiar with the area. So he's walking away and driving away without any idea of even an address? And then a text and 2 calls? Familiar with the area and having trouble even after directions? Something's wrong with this. I'm not saying there were not 2 phone calls and a text. I'm saying there's something up with this. I just don't know what. It keeps crossing my mind that the McCabe's need people to think that they arrived at Fairview before John. But if John left the waterfall before them, there would need to be some sort of explanation as to why he did not arrive before they did. Getting lost might explain that, but there's the testimony of Ryan Nagel and his friends who put the SUV there when they arrive later. They don't testify that the McCabe's were present. It's the McCabe's who say that. And Julie had said to her brother, I'll find another ride home, suggesting Jen hadn't made the offer of a ride yet. Also, if Jen had offered Julie a ride already, why didn't Julie text her brother and say, you don't need to come, I've been offered a ride? But the scenario has slowly and subtly shifted to Jen being there and telling Julie to invite her brother in, and if you want to stay, I'll give you a ride. None of the 3 witnesses in the F-150 saw John in the truck while it was at Fairview, and neither did Nagel. Heather did say she saw a male and female in the truck earlier at an intersection, but the driver of the truck said Heather was laying down at points. But testimony was that a female was alone in the SUV, and Lally would like people to believe that John was simply out of view. But these witnesses had a clear view of the SUV, and when the female in the SUV was seen, the dome light was on and she was clearly alone. Did the McCabe's really beat Karen and John to Fairview, or was it the other way around? How does someone familiar with the area get that lost for that long? I'm not saying it didn't happen, it's just that there's so much weirdness in this entire thing.
And when he called back a second time, I instructed him that it was by a friend's house, one of his niece and my daughter's friend. And I said, it's right, go past Bella's street. It's at the bottom of the hill.
Look at her. Is her testimony distasteful to her? If the directions were so simple, describing the house he already knew and saying, just go there, it's at the bottom of the hill. Why didn't she just say that the first time she gave directions? And if it was so close to a house with which John was familiar? Again, how is he so lost? Why do you suppose it's so important to McCabe to get across that John was lost? Lally asked how much time elapsed between the first and second phone call with John. She said approximately 4 or 5 minutes tops. Matt testified that the drive to Fairview is 4 minutes. Jen testified she was already driving, which is why she called instead of texting. John and Karen left several minutes before the McCabes. John is familiar with the area. If he really wasn't already at Fairview, he would have been very close. Jen is testifying that during the second call, she's still driving. That should put John O'Keefe at Fairview, either before the McCabes or, if he was lost, at the same time as the McCabes. Yet, somehow, the McCabes arrive, park on the left of the driveway or the middle, but not the right, where everybody parked, had enough time to get inside and get settled, have a conversation with Julie Nagel, all before John got there. Oh, and John was out of the SUV already when Ryan Nagel and his friends drove by. I'm sorry, this isn't right. I don't know what the truth is, but this is not it. Lally asked if Jen could hear anyone in the background when she was talking to John, and she answers no. Then Lally asks an interesting question. He asks if John was speaking in the plural or singular, like we are coming or I am coming. The witness answers it was general, like where is it? Lally highlights the mention of Bella's house. Remember, Bella is a child who is friends with John's niece. I want to specifically note here that they used the name of the child, not the name of the child's mother. Lally brings out that John and Bella's mother dated briefly years before. Here comes that trope, painting a picture. Karen Reed would have known about the child Bella. Is there going to be testimony about previous unreasonable jealousy related specifically to Bella's mother? And this would have to be specific. Were there fights over John's niece visiting her friend Bella? Was Bella blocked from events with the kids? Is there some huge story here? And the reference in the directions is the child, not the child's mother. That matters if somebody is going to try to claim jealousy. This is really crappy. Jen says when she got inside, Brian Higgins was already there. He and Brian Albert were standing in the family room talking. She said she never saw Colin and she never saw her daughter Allie. She was asked if John O'Keefe ever came in the house. She answered no. She said she arrived at around 12:20 or 12:30. Well, 12:20. Boy, these time frames have to be nice and tight. It has to be that Colin left at 12:10 so that Nicole sees him leaving, and the McCabes have to put themselves there after they know they've been seen at the bar, the last to leave. But they have to somehow be there before John, even though John left before them. Interesting to watch this. She said she doesn't recall charging her phone while she was at Fairview. Why might this be? Previous testimony was that her phone was on a charger in the kitchen and she did look at her phone. Was it usual or unusual for her to charge her phone at the Albert house? Would the charger be something she brought inside, or would it have belonged to the Alberts and just there? She doesn't recall needing to charge her phone at someone else's house, but she was able to recall that she and Matt had to wait a few minutes before walking into the waterfall because Matt was on a phone call. Still, whether or not you charged your phone is not in itself such a big event that you'd definitely remember. So her lack of recall here might mean nothing. She said she was familiar with Julie Nagel, that Julie could have possibly dog sat for me prior to that. You're not confident as to whether or not somebody dog sat for you? And more lip licking here, along with an eyebrow raise after she says this. I have questions. She testified Nagel went outside. Then Brian Jr. said there was another car outside. So Jen went to the front door. Matt testified he had gone to the front door, but he also testified that he went to the front door or the window. In her testimony here, Jen is not mentioning Matt going to the front door with her or Matt looking out the window. But in fairness, Lally did not ask her that. She said the front door was open, so it was just the storm door she was looking through.
The storm door is made out of glass, is that correct?
Yes.
So when you went over to the storm door and looked out, what, if anything, did you see?
I saw a vehicle.
And can you describe the vehicle that you saw?
I saw a dark SUV.
She said a vehicle, a dark SUV. Listen carefully to her description of the lights and the vehicles in the next clip. Watch for the mouth groom at the very end, too.
And as far as Ms. Nagel, did you make any observations of where she was when you looked outside?
I kind of just looked at the vehicle, and then I saw lights kind of over to this side. But then once I saw the vehicle, I took out my phone and I texted John.
If there was a snowplow between the SUV and the F-150, she wouldn't have seen the lights the way she described. Also, pay attention to what's missing. She saw the SUV and she saw the light, not a Jeep. The Jeep is missing from the description of her observation because the Jeep wasn't there. When she was asked if she saw anyone exit that vehicle at all, she answered no. Does she know where Brian Higgins and Brian Albert are at this precise moment? You know, all these people testify that they know that no one ever left the area, but there are times when they're so focused on something else that they wouldn't know. She said she could tell the SUV was running because she could see the red of the taillights. Recall testimony that the passenger side of the SUV was facing the house. McCabe did not see John exit the SUV. Other witnesses say Karen was alone in the SUV by the time they drove away. So John is already out of the SUV and has been out of the SUV for several minutes because Julie and 3 other witnesses were out there for several minutes and no one saw John exit. Jen is testifying right now that she can see the red of the taillights, not white, red. So that taillight was not yet broken. And minutes later, when the other witnesses drive away, Karen was alone. John had already left the SUV, and they clearly saw red taillights, no damage. Reed's taillights were intact after John had already left the vehicle. Text messages were shown to the jury. Messages from John are in green and blue is Jen. I recall the defense eliciting from Allie that if texts of both parties are in blue, it means both parties have iPhones. I bring this up now because it appears Jen had an iPhone and John did not. I don't know if this will become important, so I'm mentioning it. According to what's on the screen, the where to text was at 12:14. The message from Jen to John saying here, ? is at 12:27. At 12:31, the text from Jen is pull behind me. She said she'd seen the SUV pull ahead out front and thought, "What are you doing?" So she texted for him to pull behind her. She texted again at 12:40 saying hello. That's 9 minutes later. I wonder why she didn't go outside and talk to him, considering he hadn't responded to her text for like 20 minutes, from 12:14 to 12:39. Listen to her description of what she did while the SUV was out front. Pay particular attention to the last thing she says she does.
So I originally went to the front door, saw the car, texted them, then texted John. Then I went back, kind of sat at the table, just either threw my phone probably in my back pocket. And then a couple minutes later, I got up again and saw that the car had moved. So I had sent the pull behind me. And then a few minutes later, I went back to the front door, I'm sorry.
Immediately preceding her final text, she went to the front door. So it's see, text, see, text. There's one more text she sends at 12:40. She goes to the door, and I notice she corrected herself from window. So we're expecting see, text, but no.
And when you went back to the front door, what, if anything, did you see at that?
So at this specific point at 12:40, when I say hello, I cannot be certain whether they were still out front or if they had left.
But she looked out the door. Interesting what people do and don't recall, eh? But only 2 minutes later, she texts, "Where are you?" And 3 minutes later, at 12:45, she texts hello. And she can't remember if the SUV was still out there or not. So it's been a half an hour and he hasn't come in and he has not responded. Why doesn't she go outside? At 4:59, she texted, "Please answer."
Myself to John, "Karen is worried. We need to find you." At 4:59. Myself to John, "Please answer so I know you're okay." 5:04.
The window versus the door is important to this witness. Listen to this.
Sending these text messages and going back to the table and then going back to the window at various times.
To the front door.
To the front door.
One could say she's simply trying to be accurate, but the reason I think it's more than that is because of her earlier slip when she said she went to the window and then corrected herself to say she went to the door. Also, Matt's testimony was that he was either at the door or the window. Then he was at the door one time and the window another time. She testified she never saw anyone exit the SUV. Well, of course she wouldn't. She wasn't watching the entire time. She'd look out and then go back to the table and continue talking to people. Lally asked if John came into the house. She says no. At any time, did John respond to your text messages? No. So why is she staying in the house? Maybe his phone died. Maybe there's something wrong. Why not go outside when your friend is out there and has not responded to you for a half an hour? Lally asks her if she's had an opportunity to look at her call history. She says yes. He shows her a paper that seems to be a call record. She says it shows calls between her and John at 12:14 a.m. and 12:18 a.m. Jen's last call to John is 5:25. She testified that she looked straight out the front door and the SUV was directly in front of her. She said the second time she saw the SUV, it was right near the flagpole. Lally said, "At some point, you didn't see the SUV anymore. What did you think then?" She said maybe they decided not to come in. Maybe they got into an argument. Maybe Kaylee called. Pardon me? Of all the things to think, why would she think they got into an argument? Neither John nor Karen shared relationship things with her before. They were happy at the waterfall together. They both wanted to go to Fairview. Why, oh why, would she come up with the idea of an argument? Who might this benefit? At the end of the night, she's leaving with Matt and giving Nagel and Levinson a ride home. She said her attention was focused on the back seat and she was having a conversation with Nagel and Levinson. She did not know where Nagel and Levinson lived. She says she assumes they gave Matt directions. Wonder when they did that, considering they were occupied with talking to Jen. Matt testified he did not know where they lived either. After dropping off Nagel and Levinson, Jen and Matt went home. She says she arrived home sometime after 2 a.m. She went upstairs to bed. She said Matt got a snack and came upstairs after that. Jen wanted to watch a show, but Matt wanted to sleep. Here this comes up again. Matt went to sleep and Jen went on her phone. Lally asks what she did on her phone. Listen to her response and how she first tried to buy some time and tried to launch into an explanatory narrative. Those of you who have been watching this channel for a while know what I'm talking about when I say that, but the judge stops her.
I was researching, my husband and I did briefly talk. My daughter had gotten an offer to play on a club
Just tell us what you were doing, please.
Sure. I was researching a basketball team.
She also texted her sisters, and she's texting in a group chat with her husband and another individual. It's after 2 a.m, and she just came from her sisters. Lally asked what video, if any, Jen played on her phone while she was at the Fairview residence. The video was "It's Raining Men," but she didn't simply say that. She again gave an explanatory narrative.
So one of my sisters loves this song "Raining Men." And she always, well, not always, maybe every once in a while, she's a little too much to drink and takes out an umbrella and sings and dances, and it's like a big family joke.
I don't know what her witness prep was like. Sometimes a witness will be told, I can't ask you leading questions. And sometimes, as a result, the witness figures out to give more of an answer than a straight yes or no. But I don't know here. Lally has been leading. So it's not like this witness needs to elaborate or explain. This is odd from a prosecution's witness. She seems to be focused on explaining herself rather than on answering his question. I would expect this behavior from a suspect or a defendant. She does say the video was "It's Raining Men," and in saying so, she said she played it a couple of times. But the joke about this song was with one of her sisters, not these young people at the table. Why would Brian Jr.'s friends care about this inside family joke that they're not in on? Did you hear that? She played it for her nieces and nephews, plural. Oh, how many of her nieces and nephews were present? She's talking about a different event rather than recalling that night. Either that, or there were nieces, plural, and nephews, plural, present at Fairview. There was other testimony that she did play a video on her phone, though. Odd, she'd have to go somewhere else in her memory for this information. And odd that she'd feel the need to explain. I don't know what's here, but I'm telling you, there's something here. I'm going to play it in context so you don't have to take my word for it. And at the very end, notice her eye block.
So I just was playing it, showing my other nieces and nephews, and we were just like laughing because they all have umbrellas, and it's just something, it's like an inside family joke. So I played that, I think, a couple of times.
She said that once she went to bed, she did nothing else except possibly could have gone to the bathroom, as she does that almost every night. She testified she has an Apple Watch. She doesn't recall whether she wore it to bed that night or not. She said she usually takes off her watch, but there have been times she's gone to bed with it on. She doesn't recall whether she took it off that particular night. Wonder if she recalls putting it on in the morning. She says she woke to her phone ringing at 4:53 a.m. It was John O'Keefe's 14-year-old niece, Kaylee. Kaylee told Jen John didn't come home and Karen wanted to talk to her. She said she heard Karen in the background screaming, "Jen, Jen." Jen said Karen got on the phone and screamed her name several times, and that Karen said John didn't come home, that they'd had a fight, and that she'd left him at the waterfall. You know, the first thing that crossed my mind was Rohypnol, but that can't be correct, because we saw Karen walking out of the waterfall and she wasn't stumbling or leaning on anyone. And note the argument theme again. Hard to know if Karen really said this or not. The witness is speaking in general terms. I do recall, though, an EMT saying Karen was having a tough time emotionally because her last words to John weren't good. So there is that. I know we're supposed to presume innocent, but let's play a little game here for a minute. Let's say a woman ran down her boyfriend in front of somebody's house after an argument that nobody heard. It's not unusual for a suspect to be stressed out waiting for the victim to be found, so they do something to ensure that the victim is found. Why then does she not call Jen and ask her to call the Albert residence to inquire? Or did she? Why doesn't she call the police and report him missing? She was worried, and she did wake up Kaylee. Whose idea was it to call Jen? Karen's or Kaylee? Let's keep on with this game of presuming guilt. Why does she say she left John at the waterfall? Well, a perpetrator may say they left their loved one somewhere else in order to misdirect. But that's when they don't want the person to be found and or don't want to be associated with the place they are found. This misdirection, though, usually occurs upon questioning or when the suspect realizes he or she has no choice but to say something. Leave that aside and break this down into two-part. If it's that she doesn't want him to be found right away, then why make that call? And if the motive for making the call is stress that the victim hasn't been found, well, then that contradicts misdirection. It can't be both. Let's go with not wanting to be placed at the scene first. Why would she be saying this to Jen? She'd only call Jen so that somebody could actually find John. Also, Karen knows that she and Jen and John were outside in the parking lot at the waterfall at the end of the night at the same time. Karen knows that Jen knows she did not leave John there at the waterfall because Karen knows Jen was standing there when Karen and John walked away together. What about another explanation? What if Karen was so intoxicated that she was just blacked out? Well, no one saw any indicia of drunkenness, and it sounds like everybody else had much more to drink than she did. But let's push it. Let's say she's blackout drunk and somehow hiding it really well. Then if she believes she left John at the waterfall and they never went to Fairview, why on earth would she call Jen McCabe? Why wouldn't she call her own friends? What does she need Jen for then? It's not like she needs her to call the Alberts or anything, or not like she needs Jen to help her go over there. If she believes she left him at the waterfall, then Jen is irrelevant. What if the perpetrator is trying to set it up so it looks like she's mentally ill, dissociating maybe? Then still, why call Jen? Jen would be irrelevant, and she wouldn't have been resistant to go to the hospital, and she would have put on such a show that they'd have kept her. This doesn't make any sense unless you're writing a crappy fiction. Then this testimony gets weird. as you listen to this next clip, keep in your mind that there is video of Jen McCabe standing in the parking lot of the waterfall watching Karen and John walking away. Even if Jen had not seen an SUV at Fairview, she knows Karen and John left the waterfall together. She was also on the phone with John, giving directions. If Karen and John were driving separately, how does Karen know how to get to the Fairview residence? And how did John O'Keefe get there? And where is John O'Keefe's vehicle? Remember, Jen knows Karen did not leave John at the waterfall. And watch her facial expressions at the end.
And so then I remembered that Chris Albert had still been at the bar. So I thought, well, maybe John walked home with Chris because Chris lives close to the waterfall.
And so
Now, why would she think that? Chris Albert and Nevercracker are buds now? And Jen didn't see any of the things she saw and has forgotten she had conversations with John? Really? She didn't think John went home with Chris. This is ludicrous. So, Jen calls Julie Albert. This explains why Jen has completely forgotten everything she saw and heard the night before. She needs to explain why she called Julie Albert at 5 a.m. She said Matt asked her what was going on and she explained it to him. This is different from how he presented it. I mean, how Lally led it out of him. Listening to Matt's testimony, one might think he overheard all this. Jen testified that when she explained things to Matt, he said, "What are you talking about? We saw the SUV in front of Fairview." Oh, very interesting. Maybe he didn't know at the time as much as people think he knew. I repeat, Jen knew Karen did not leave John at the bar because she saw them leave together. So was she trying to feed her own husband a story? Jen testified that she never actually spoke with Julie Albert because Matt said, "What are you talking about? We saw an SUV," and that's when Jen hung up the phone from the call to Julie. She said Julie hadn't answered yet. She said she spoke with Karen again on Kaylee's phone and told her that she and Matt had seen the SUV at Fairview, and Karen's response was to yell, "Jen, Jen, did I hit him? Could I have hit him?" Really? No other communication before that. No back and forth. Nothing? Really? And if Jen is so diabolical, Karen. If Karen is so diabolical, a killer wanting to escape, why would she bring up even the idea of having hit him?
And then she proceeded to say that she had a cracked taillight.
Interesting choice of words. She proceeded to say, the witness is skipping pertinent information right here. There was something else said before, proceeded to say, and whatever that was is not being disclosed here. She said Karen was hard to understand. Listen to Jen's description of what she was thinking.
So my brain started going, okay, well, if she left him there, where could he be? Who could he be with?
According to Jen, when Karen said she left him there, she was referring to the waterfall, not Fairview. Well, aside from the fact that Jen knew better, she has since told Karen that they'd seen her SUV at Fairview. So when Jen is explaining this thought process, where does she think the where is? Is she running it through like Karen left John at Fairview? Or the waterfall? Because if Jen is saying or supposedly thinking Fairview, then who could he be with is not a question. If she's thinking the waterfall, well, she knows Karen didn't leave him at the waterfall. I don't think the thing Jen was trying to figure out was who John was with. Lally asks her what she, Jen, did next. Instead of simply stating what she did next, we get another long story that starts with so, then, a big breath, and an explanatory. And watch her body language in this clip.
So then earlier in the night, there was another individual who we had been in contact with, or my husband had been talking to, and he had mentioned that he was gonna meet up with John at Waterfall as well, but he never ended up coming. I knew he was at a house close to Fairview. So I thought, well, maybe if they got into a fight, like John might have texted this individual and maybe he just ended up on his couch.
Interesting. Wonder if we'll hear from that person. Jen said she knew this individual was at a house close to Fairview. Oh yeah? How did she know that? He was at the house, so he wasn't living there. Did John know this? Did John know this house? How did John know this? If his friend is near there, why did John get lost if he knew where he was? And she said maybe if they got in a fight. Jen said she called this individual Tom Beatty, but he didn't answer. She said she concluded that they had to go look for John, so she got dressed. She said she went downstairs and made coffee. She didn't know how much time passed, but all of a sudden she heard screaming out front. She went to her door and saw Karen running up the walkway. She said during the first couple of calls with Karen was at the house, meaning John's house. Remember, they were communicating on Kaylee's phone. Jen says she didn't know where Karen was during the other calls. What other calls? She only described two. Jen testified Karen was screaming her name and asking, could I have hit him? And this.
And then she was yelling, we have to go to Fairview.
Going to Fairview makes the most sense if that's the last place Karen saw him. But why are they going there? Why is Jen not phoning over there and asking the Alberts to check? There's a snowstorm. If John is in that house, the Alberts could tell her that. If he's not in the house, but on the property, then having the Alberts go outside and check is the fastest, easiest, safest thing to do. And wouldn't a Boston police officer want to go out and check his yard and the surrounding areas for a fellow officer? She was willing to wake up Julie Albert at 5 a.m. when she knew darn well John was not there. So why does she not call Fairview? What's missing in these conversations between Jen and Karen? What is being left out? Did Jen tell Karen she called the Alberts? Or that she couldn't call the Albert? Or they weren't answering? Did Jen suggest to Karen that maybe she'd hit him? Did Jen tell Karen John never entered the house? Jen said Matt was yelling down that Karen was going to wake up the neighborhood. Matt's testimony was that he came downstairs. Why is he now upstairs? After this, Jen tells Matt she's going with Karen. And there was another car there at the McCabe house. It was Carrie Roberts. Jen told Karen she would drive Karen's vehicle, and then Carrie Roberts called. That's the testimony. She said Karen was telling Carrie that she'd cracked her taillight and they needed to go to Fairview. Matt testified he was concerned about Jen and Karen driving around with a taillight that he believed was out. He testified he didn't realize that it was actually broken. He thought it was just out. So if he was concerned about this, why is Jen going to drive Karen's vehicle? Jen said Karen was again saying, did I hit him? And Carrie told Karen to shut up. Jen says Carrie said they should go back to John's because maybe he's in there and passed out and you just didn't see him. What if there's a possibility that John is safe at home, but there's also a possibility, any possibility, that John is out in the snowstorm somewhere? Then you go look for him at the place where he's in danger. You don't go to the safe place first. This makes no sense. If he's out there and needs help, then time matters a lot. And if they think Karen is off her rocker, what about Kaylee? If John was home, would Kaylee not have seen him either? Jen testified she'd met Carrie Roberts once before. Lally asked how Jen met Carrie, so she told this whole story about John taking them both along with the kids to get Reebok shoes. Jen testified she did not have Carrie in her phone as a contact previously. Lally tries to get Jen to say that Reed's vehicle had a backup camera. He tries a couple of times and she doesn't remember seeing it. She says they drove back to John's house, which I find strange. And Jen says Karen showed her the cracked taillight. Stick a pin in this. Jen testified she saw there were missing pieces from the taillight, but it was also covered in snow. But she saw that pieces were missing. Jen says that Carrie told Karen, "You were driving around drunk and you could have hit anything." And Carrie rushed them to go into the house. Man, this story is so weird. Why does Carrie think Karen was driving around drunk? Where did she come up with that idea? And this witness is testifying to what another witness said, yet the defense is not objecting. And is Carrie rushing them to go into the house so they can find John faster, or maybe move this whole thing along? If they want to find John, why are they going to a place where they've been told he is not? Why aren't they going to the place where he was last seen? They show a picture here that is obviously not from the 28th or 29th. This is John's driveway. Jen testified she knew John had a security camera, and how she knew that was John was so excited at getting a ring, and he was always showing us. Really? Are you kidding me? So excited? We're talking about a cop, not a 12-year-old boy. She said they went into the house through the garage door and that the garage door was open. The open garage door is consistent with an earlier witness's statement. She said normally when you walk into John's house, you'd take off your shoes. Carrie and Jen both took off their boots, but Karen just walked straight into the house. Well, yeah, she's only going to be there long enough to prove to these two that John is not in there, and then they've got to get to Fairview because John might be in trouble. Who wants to be wasting time putting on and taking off boots? It's an emergency. Jen said the three of them dispersed inside the house and checked the house for John. Jen went into Kaylee's room and spoke with her. Lally asked what she said to Kaylee. You will see what appears to be a display of emotion at this question. I am going to play you 3 brief clips. First is a bass line without sound when she's not crying. The next one is when Lally asks the question. You can see her gear up to put on the emotion. And then when the defense says objection, poof, she's fine. And then the judge says, I'll allow it.
And when you left from Kaylee, what is it that you said to her as you were leaving?
Objection.
Oh,
Now she's going to give us a little show. I'm going to play this without sound so you can focus on the body language. Look closely at the eyes, the forehead, and around the nose. There is no more redness than there was 5 minutes ago. There are no tears. The forehead remains smooth. There's a muscle there that should contort if there's grief, but it doesn't budge. There's nothing. And she made a miraculous recovery from her grief and testified that after that, they all went to Fairview in Carrie's vehicle. Then they show her a photo of Reed's vehicle in the police sally port. Why didn't they show her a picture of Reed's vehicle taken by John's ring footage, which would have been a more accurate representation of what the witness would have seen on that day? Oh, I have some ideas as to why, but I'll leave that for now and point out that ring footage would have been a more accurate representation, but the defense is still not objecting. Lally asks if the photo is consistent with what she saw. Oh man. The witness says correct minus the snow, etc. What etc. then? And they show ring video. And you know what it proves? It was snowing. And no way this witness could have seen such detail. It also shows that they all got out of their vehicles and went right into the house. I don't see them standing around looking at the taillight, do you? Do you see Jen McCabe go back to the back end of that vehicle at all? Then they show Jen dashcam video and ask if the picture is similar to what she saw on the 29th. This is dashcam footage of Reed's vehicle in John's driveway. How many times has she seen this video before? How many times has she seen the photos from the sally port? Did the prosecution taint their own witness? And where's the video of Karen showing them that taillight? Jen said they were going to Fairview. Lally asked why they were going to Fairview. Was Jen's answer that maybe John was in trouble out or near that residence? Or that they needed to find John? Or that she'd called Beatty a couple of times and he still wasn't answering, so they figured they'd better head in that direction? No. Her answer was that it was because Karen kept screaming they had to go to Fairview. If Karen wasn't so persistent, would they have ever gone? Why did Jen not want to go to Fairview when that is the most reasonable place to go? So now they're all in Carrie's vehicle and going to Fairview. It's a 10-minute drive, but it's a snowstorm. How much precious time was wasted by ignoring Karen and insisting that they drive to John's house and go in to look around? How many precious, potentially life-saving minutes were wasted? Jen says during the drive, Karen was screaming at Carrie to hurry, that she was screaming both their names and asking, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? Lally asks what Jen was doing at this time. Her answer isn't what she was doing. She says Carrie was driving slowly. Jen says that she was looking out the window. Jen was looking out the window. She said it was a crazy situation, that Karen kept yelling, where is he? Could he have walked home? Could he be walking home? Well, first of all, the witness is putting the focus on other people at the scene when she was asked what she was doing. So now she's sort of saying, well, she was looking out the window, implying she was looking for John. And this business of Karen yelling, where is he? Could he have walked home? Could he be walking home? This is the first time we've heard this. But you know, that question, could he have walked home? Could he be walking? That actually makes some sense. Jen said that as they approached certain landmarks, plural, Karen was screaming if he could be at certain people's houses. Lally asked, whose houses was she asking if he could be at? Jen said she was asking if he could be at Bella's house. Whoa, hold on here. She just testified. Karen was asking if she could be at different people's houses. Clearly, plural. People's houses. Clearly different. Different houses. Lally asks the question in the plural, houses. And despite what she'd testified to one breath ago, Jen says Bella's house, the singular. This is disgusting. And Lally lingered here, asking questions about Bella and her mother that have already been asked and answered repeatedly. Driving home the trope. Jen said that Carrie said maybe he was at another house that was also nearby, and Karen said, "Who's that? Who's she?" Well, she was a woman who John had dated years ago. So it's not Karen coming up with ideas that John is with another woman. It's Carrie. And if Karen is asking who is she, then she doesn't know. It's not like she can be jealous of a previous relationship if Karen didn't even know who this woman was, let alone that she and John had dated years earlier. Driving the trope home. Virtuous basketball coach. Jealous evil girlfriend. Well, so far, Jen's testimony is that John knew 3 different people in that area. So, how does he get lost on his way to Fairview? And you know, she never did mention anything about Brian Higgins' Jeep with the big old plow attached to it. Jen testified that Karen was yelling about Bella's mom and talking about John maybe being with her. Jen is giving a vague description of this. She's speaking in generalities as she testified, and she never says what specifically Karen said. I don't know how they get away with all this crap in court. She said Karen just kept screaming, and sometimes she would sit back and be quiet for a minute, but then she'd start up all over again. Jen said she had to give directions to Carrie to get to Fairview. Interesting that Lally felt the need to elicit this information. She said as they approached, the driver's side was facing the house. They drove past the flagpole area. It was then that Karen started screaming, there he is, and started banging to get out. So it sounds like Karen might also have missed him at first, as it wasn't until they passed the flagpole that she started yelling. Jen said she didn't see anything. Well, by the time Karen yelled, they'd passed him. And I gotta question how hard Jen was really looking. They seemed pretty dismissive of Karen and made her go through the charade of going through John's house even after Karen said he wasn't there. Also, Carrie had to focus on driving and Jen was on the passenger side, so the opposite side to where John was. Karen got out of the car and ran to John. Jen says Karen lifted her shirt and lifted John's shirt and got on top of him. Sounds like Karen thought John's problem was the cold, not being struck by a vehicle. Then Jen said Carrie went over and was wiping snow from John's face. At no time did Jen describe anybody turning John over, so John was on his back. They show the witness dash cam video to illustrate the conditions and lighting at that location around that time. I just want to note that Carrie was likely driving much more slowly than emergency vehicles were. Jen said she came around. I believe she meant she came around the vehicle. Karen and Carrie were already with John. She says she just froze. Then she and Carrie made eye contact. And that's when Jen called 911. She said Carrie asked her to go to the car and get towels out from the back of the vehicle. She said John was flat on his back. She said his body was covered in snow. How could she have seen that if Karen had already lifted his shirt? And what does covered mean? Does it mean concealed, buried, or just snow all over him? EMTs described the snow as coming up to his ribcage, so we know he wasn't buried. The broken glass was found beneath him, but there was plenty of snow underneath that glass. He probably did have a lot of snow all over him because it was snowing heavily by this time. But we also know by the broken glass, the EMTs, and what few photos the police took that there was a lot of snow under him as well. The snow under him is just as important as the snow on top of him. And the snow under him proves he was not on the ground at midnight or 12:30 or even 1:45. He got there much later than that. Carrie was putting blankets underneath him and screaming at Karen to get off of him. Karen and Carrie were screaming back and forth at each other. Karen was screaming, "Is he dead? Is he dead?" And Jen walked away. Jen explains that they were loud and she was trying to be calm. And she hadn't been asked for this explanation. She said she was trying to be calm and get help there for John as soon as possible, but she'd already called 911. Carrie starts yelling about doing CPR and tells Karen to start mouth to mouth. Sounds like Karen started. Jen says Karen started yelling there was blood coming out of John's mouth. Lally, trying to fix something here, totally leads. It's so bad, it's like he is testifying. He says that during the incident, Jen walked away so she could better hear 911. Jen says yes. How the crap does he get away with this? That is not what the witness said. And that is not the time frame that was being discussed. The witness messed up. And now Lally is giving the witness's new testimony for her. So he can make it sound better. But that is not what she said. This is unbelievable. Carrie asked if Jen could take over the compressions for CPR. Jen said she did take over. She describes Reed running around the scene screaming, "Is he dead? Could I have hit him? Did I hit him?" I still want to know where she got this idea in her head. If she killed him in a jealous rage, why is she running around screaming this? And why then would she call Jen at all? For those who can't watch the entire trial, I'm putting up this clip so you can see the body language and hear the words coming from the witness's own mouth.
One EMT had asked, his name, his age, things like that. If she knew what happened, Miss Reed stated that she hit him. Besides running around saying, "I hit him, did I hit him, could I have done this? Is he dead? Is he dead?" At one point, one of the police officers put Miss Reed in the back of her cruiser, and he asked for myself to go over with her, and Carrie came over with us as well.
All the witnesses in a cruiser? Is this to contain them or question them? I don't know, because Lally changed the subject. Jen said that when Karen spoke to the paramedic, she said, "I hit him," not "did I?" or "could I?" So now they're in the back of a cruiser. Karen wanted them to hold hands and pray. Karen saw the blood on her hands and asked if she could have gotten her period, and they told her it was John's blood. That she would ask this shows you her mental state. Some of you might find this surprising or weird, but I don't find it that way at all. They prayed. Then Karen kept asking if he was dead. She wanted Carrie to go look. Well, of course she wants to know. She wanted Jen to promise to take care of the kids if John died. Karen's focus is clearly John and the kid, not herself. I'm going to play you another clip of crucial information. Watch her expression, her breathing. Listen for her use of justification. Listen to her cadence as compared to her baseline. And at the end, there will be a second when her eyes open wide, the way people do when they are facing a threat.
And Carrie said, "I'll go over and check on him." And she was yelling, "Are they working on him?" And then at that point, she grabbed my hands and she said, "Google hypothermia, Google how long it takes to die in the cold." And so I had my phone out and it was cold and my hands were frozen and I have MS, and I took my phone out while she was screaming and shaking my arm, and I attempted to Google how long does it take to die in the cold.
There are first responders everywhere. And Karen is asking Jen to Google this? What? Okay. Well, people do weird things in these situations, so maybe. But Jen's behavior here on the stand, telling the story, is way off. There's something here. Something is very wrong here. And listen to her answer this next question. Look at her face. Listen to the volume and tone of her voice and notice how quickly she answers. This is a big one for her.
When you conducted that search, that was at the defendant's request on scene sometime after 6 a.m. on that day, correct?
Yes.
You'll call.
What the heck? Did they get her actual phone? This makes me think she did this Google search before. I'm not saying she did, I don't know that, but the red flags are a-flying. She said the next thing she knew, they were moving John, and so she and Karen went over to that area. The next thing she knew, so she's skipping over time. And wait, where was the cop whose cruiser that was? How did they get out of the back of the cruiser? Our cruisers automatically lock. It's a thing. Many a rookie has been razzed for locking themselves in the back of a cruiser. Were the cruiser doors ajar or something? Did the cop let them out? If the cop was there, did he hear this Google conversation? If the cop was there, why didn't Karen just ask him the question instead of making Jen Google? Where did Karen's phone go so that she had to ask Jen to Google? If the cop wasn't there, then why are witnesses left together unmonitored? Lally asked Jen if she knew what happened. She said no, and she said this. Watch her body language.
I was completely just in a state of shock and disbelief.
And that sort of.
She said one of the officers asked her to go into the house to wake up the Alberts. She said she believes she called Nicole prior to that, right after she got off the phone with 911, but Nicole didn't answer. She said she didn't recall whether she called Brian Albert or not. Jen said she went into the unlocked house, up the stairs to Nicole and Brian's room, and she opened the door. She saw them both asleep. This sounds different than bursting into the room. Jen's account of this sounds more in keeping with the behaviors we've seen from Jen. So I'm inclined to believe her version of this rather than Nicole and Brian's dramatic version. She doesn't recall the dog being in the room at the time. If anyone came into my house, my dog would be alerting like crazy before the person could get up to my room. How could this German Shepherd be missed by anyone, even family, coming into the house, let alone the bedroom? If the dog was there, it would be memorable. If the dog wasn't there, her absence would be noticeable. I do not believe that this witness doesn't recall this. Jen said she went over to their bed and called out their names. Very different description from what Brian and Nicole said. Not hysterical. Listen to what she says she tells them.
I'm telling them that we just found John out front, and I could have possibly said John has died. We just found John out front.
I could have possibly said that John has died. Oh, now why would she say that? John had not been pronounced dead. As far as Jen knew, they were working on him and he was en route to hospital. They don't rush dead people to the hospital. Why would a layperson state that he's dead? Does this witness know that Brian Albert slipped and said Jen said John was dead? There was an initial conversation with Officer Lang, who she knew, and Brian and Nicole. This conversation only lasted a few minutes. The second conversation with police didn't take place until hours later. She said she stayed in the house until around 11 or 11:30. Lally asked her if at any point during the course of the morning she looked outside. She said she did not. Then he asked if the police were still outside when Julie Albert arrived. She said there wasn't. Well, how does she know that there wasn't any police outside if She never looked outside. And remember that when Julie Albert arrived, Brian had gone to the door? Previous testimony was that they'd seen her arrive, so he went to the door to tell her to come in. So they can't see what's going on outside, or they can. Or do they only see what they need to see? She's asked who is there. She says Lenk and Gallagher. Then she adds Higgins like he's an afterthought. She says she doesn't know how Brian Higgins came to know or how he came to be there. She got Lenk's phone number from Julie Albert. Then she called Lenk to come back to the house. Oh boy. These witnesses have been talking about this for hours, and now they're calling this officer with whom they have a personal connection back. What kind of story is coming here? Lally asked why Jen called Lenk, and she launches into an explanatory narrative again. She said she was slowly piecing together what had just happened. She doesn't have to piece it together. She was there. She says it was then that she told Lenk about what Karen had said that morning. The way Jen describes this whole thing is that Reed wouldn't shut up, that she was repeating the same self-damning words over and over and over, that she was screaming the words. And Jen forgot? What? And she only remembers all this, which is basically the majority of her testimony is repeating over and over Reed saying these things. She only remembered all that after conferring for hours with other witnesses. What? She said they went home. She said we went in the house and Officer Proctor was coming to speak to us. Oh, when did she learn Proctor was coming? Because this sounds like she knew this before she got into her home. When and how did she learn this? Lally asked how much time passed between the time she got home and the time the troopers arrived. She said it was pretty quick, so she knew ahead of time. And you know what? We never hear how or when she learned that Proctor would be coming to her house. She said Brian Albert also arrived. She said she'd asked him to come. Oh, when? She said she was shaken up and nervous and wanted his support. Why was she nervous? What is there to be nervous about? Some people get nervous every time they see a police officer, even if they've done nothing wrong. But there are police in her family, so that does not apply to her. And why does she need this support? What's wrong with her husband? Oh, because Brian Albert is a police officer and she has to talk to the police and she's nervous about talking to police. Is anyone else seeing some problems here? She said when she spoke with troopers, Brian and Matt were in her bedroom. Maybe she thought that. Maybe not. But Matt's testimony was that he didn't know where Brian was while Jen was being interviewed. That means Brian was not in the bedroom with Matt. Jen had a phone conversation with Karen while Karen was in the ambulance. She testified Karen was saying, "Is he dead? Is he dead?" And that Karen asked if Jen would visit her. Jen told her yes, she would visit Karen, but she didn't. In fact, she had no further communication with Karen in any form. Well, yeah, she doesn't need to because she accomplished what she needed to accomplish. Remember, she testified earlier that she only met Carrie once. She didn't have Carrie's contact information, and she did not get that information from Karen. But somehow, there are communications between Carrie and Jen, and she doesn't recall how she got Carrie's information. But she does know that she wanted that contact information so she could get updates on how John was. But she told Nicole and Brian John was dead. So what is there to update? And that was the end of the day, but her testimony is not done. That's all I've got for you for now. Trust your gut. I'll see you in the comments.